Congressman Michael McCaul, the House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman. Chairman, it's always good to have you. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Neil.
The war is widening. That's pretty clear if you look at what Hezbollah has been doing to the north and, of course, what Hamas has already done along the Gaza area. That was just the scenario that a lot of people feared. What do you make of it?
Well, that is a nightmare scenario. To contain this war in Gaza is really the key here. If it escalates with Hezbollah to the north out of Lebanon, they have 100,000 rockets, Hezbollah does, which would overload the Iron Dome. It's not capable of protecting from that many rockets. And so, you know, with Iran playing a role in this, which I know the administration doesn't want to talk about, with Hezbollah in Lebanon, with the ISIS, radical Islamists in Syria, and others threatening a jihad movement to Jerusalem, the last thing we want is an escalation of this war, and the best way to do that is through deterrence by sending our aircraft carriers and frigates to the Mediterranean as a warning sign not to escalate.
You know, Chairman, you talk about warning signs. Our own Jackie Heinrich had raised this with John Kirby at the White House today, whether there had been, you know, early signals or warnings of this attack last week by Hamas. This is from the White House briefing a few moments ago.
Can you speak to the reports that Israel was warned by Egypt?
I can't.
McCaul from Foreign Affairs made that allegation this morning, saying that that was something that members were told on the Foreign Affairs Committee. So, has that been discussed at all, or is that something you're looking into?
I can't speak to specific intelligence matters. Again, there will be a time to look back at this, as we always do, and we will. Right now, we're sharpening the intelligence gathering and cooperation and sharing with Israel, as we should, since they're involved in active operations, and we're making sure that they get the tools they need.
All right, so your intelligence might be saying one thing, Chairman. John Kirby might be holding cards close to his vest. His and at the White House says another. Who's right?
Well, we do know the Egyptian intelligence did refer this to Israel. And I can't get into any more depth than that, but I do think there was a threat stream out there. It was a failure of intelligence. And you know, we had a classified briefing that I moderated with the entire House today. And we're gonna have to get to the bottom of what went wrong. They planned for almost a year, Hamas did, to make this horrible invasion attack on Israel, and yet there were no warning signs in advance. When the Egyptians did warn Israeli officials, obviously there wasn't enough done to stop it. This concerns me, not just with respect to Hamas, but what about our intelligence on Hezbollah? What about our intelligence on Iran? They say there's no clear link to Iran. I disagree with that. Iran gives them $100 million a year, and we know that a lot of the weapons systems they get come straight out of Iran. So the idea that Iran's not complicit or doesn't have any fingerprints on this is absolutely laughable, I think, from an intelligence standpoint.
Can I go back, though, Chairman? You raised a valid point in Iran. A lot of people are wanting to know whether this is just semantics the administration is playing, is what type of aid or planning was involved here. But back to this Egyptian warning, was it to the point of saying Hamas was going to lead a multi-pronged attack on Israel? Was it that blunt, that blatant?
You know, again, I can't get into specific details, but a warning was made from the Egyptian intelligence to the Israelis. What did our IC community know about this? It's unclear. The answers are not very good today, to be honest with you. And we don't know what levels this intelligence went up the chain in Israel prior to this terror attack from Hamas.
Chairman, we're learning that more American munitions have arrived on site to Israel to help them out with this. We know that the USS Gerald R. Ford is just off waters as a presence. More could be coming. Do you think at this point there is a reason to go even beyond that, to have advisors on the ground, for example, in Israel?
Yeah, I think the more threat posturing we can have in the region, the more deterrence we have from an escalation. You know, as was mentioned in your report, we do have special operators, and I know the FBI hostage rescue team assisting the IDF, the Israelis, as they move from bombing command and control to going house to house, which is what they're going to start doing soon, that's where it gets really dangerous to rescue hostages and perhaps Americans and Israelis. That's going to take a long time, to be honest with you. And that's when they really need our assistance. No one's better at going house to house than we are, because we perfected that in Iraq. Fallujah, it was a good example in 2004. So they need our training and assistance. That's why we are there helping them.
Chairman, the State Department, as we've just learned, is looking at trying to get Americans who are trying to get out of there the means to do so. This follows on the heels of Canada planning to fly a lot of its citizens and dependents out of Israel by the end of the week. Do you know anything more about that? How will that be different than what was absolute pandemonium around Afghanistan, for example?
Yeah, I talked to the Undersecretary of State today about this. I have a task force in our committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, to assist members who get calls from their constituents about getting Americans out of Israel. There are about 500,000 American citizens in Israel, a lot of them with dual citizenship. We need to help. If they want to get out, we need to help them. What I worry about are the almost 20 Americans that are unaccounted for now, and we don't know where they are, whether they've been killed or taken hostage and taken into Gaza. And I will say, Neil, I was in the kibbutz a year ago with Kevin McCarthy, to that very community that was overrun by Hamas, and they massacred that entire village that we were in, and then went into the daycare center and killed the children that I saw a year ago, and decapitated children and babies. This is like beyond the pale. It's terror, it's evil at its worst.
You know, I know you can't share much intelligence, and I respect that, Chairman, but I would be curious your own take on what would compel Hamas to do something like this. Now, of course, it's had control over the Gaza since, 2007. There have been 3 or 4 major incursions, some call them outright wars, under their control, but nothing ever like this. There might be a search to trigger a jihad or something that Ayatollah Khomeini wanted after 9/11, or something grander. Do you know of anything beyond just the brutality that would trigger it, that would make them think, Hamas think, that this strategy was a winner for them?
Well, you're right. It's the largest, I think, terror attack by Hamas. It was the 50th year anniversary of Yom Kippur, and also the anniversary of Anwar Sadat's assassination.
Exactly.
However, I think there are larger forces at play here. Remember, Iran is tied to Russia, which is tied to China, North Korea. We don't really know. I do know that Iran had a major factor in this, even though the administration won't admit that. But I think your question is very valid. Why now, and why so massive? And I think the anniversary had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and they've had to know, to your point, that the Israeli response would be, as it's turned out to be, massive, and 10, maybe 100-fold, to make the point that this was an unwise, horrific decision on the part of Hamas. Maybe we'll get to know soon. While I still have you, sir, of course, it looks like Republicans might have settled on this speaker issue around Steve Scalise. We're told that Jim Jordan will throw his support behind him. The only issue is when all of that's going to happen. Do you know?
Well, we hope any moment now. We were told maybe, around this hour. We don't want to go to the floor without the requisite number, that being 217. We don't want to go through 15 rounds and ballots, which.
Well, are there other names emerging, Chairman? I'm sorry. Are there other names emerging? I mean, what you would think with Jordan throwing his support to Scalise, that's it, it's done. But maybe not.
No, there'd be no other nominees. It'd just be a question of whether this 8 or so gang of 8, if you will throw their support for Scalise, enough to give him 217. And we don't want to do that and make the charade that was done last time. Because if anything, Neil, this projects weakness to the world. And this is the last thing we need to be showing, is that democracy can't function. And we need to govern. And the first bill that Steve is going to put on the floor is my resolution condemning Hamas for their terror attack and supporting Israel.
would there be another measure to stop this single vote? All it takes is a single congressman to nix a speaker and prompt what we just saw undo Kevin McCarthy.
Well, that's right. And so with a razor-thin majority, and you see him walking behind me here,
Right.
Every vote's going to count, and some members aren't even here, and that makes it worse. So every vote's going to count.
But
I
that
think
right to
they're huddling
vacate,
up.
the right to vacate that gives a single congressman the power to nix
Oh.
a speaker. I know you're not a fan of that. Are you going to insist on that to settle the speaker matter, that whoever they settle on, assuming it's Steve Scalise, no guarantees, that
Well,
measure,
yeah,
that power goes?
Well, we as a conference can entertain that. We can change that in motion to vacate later at a later date. I think right now we're really focused on getting a speaker in the chair so we can get the work of the people done.
All right, Chairman, we'll see what happens. Thank you very much. Michael McCaul, the Texas Republican.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.